Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, not from a nightmare, but from a strange, unshakable emptiness, like the life you've built no longer fits you? That's how it begins for many, not with drama, but with silence. The phrase, "dark night of the soul," conjures images of long, sleepless nights, of silence so deep it echoes, of a soul wandering through some unseen wilderness. But what if that darkness isn't just despair? What if it's sacred? What if, beneath the pain, something luminous is being born? The term itself was coined by a 16th century Spanish mystic and poet, St. John of the Cross. For him, it wasn't just a poetic phrase, it was a real, spiritual ordeal. But more than that, it was a divine invitation, not to escape suffering, but to walk through it. Not to find answers, but to become the question. So, what actually happens when the light goes out? What stirs in the silence when every comforting belief, every spiritual high, every certainty fades into shadow? The descent into the dark night begins quietly, maybe even unnoticed. A whisper, a restlessness, a feeling that the map you've followed no longer leads anywhere. You might call it a crisis, or maybe just an ache. But beneath that ache is a call, a sacred invitation to strip away everything that isn't real. St. John described the dark night as a kind of purification. First, the senses lose their thrill. Music no longer uplifts, meditation feels dry. Then comes something deeper. The inner faculties, our thoughts, our memories, our very will, start to falter. It can feel like losing yourself, and in a way, you are. But does the soul suffer in vain? Or is that silence speaking in a language you've never learned to hear? In today's world, not everyone uses religious language, but the essence of the dark night still finds us. Maybe it looks like burnout. Maybe it's a midlife crisis, or that moment where the career, the relationship, the identity you've built suddenly feels hollow. It's not depression, though it may look like it. Unlike pathological depression, which is often characterized by chemical imbalance and despair without direction, the dark night bears the imprint of sacred purpose and spiritual gestation. It's not chaos for the sake of chaos. It's something else. Carl Jung called this the encounter with the shadow. The part of ourselves we've hidden, disowned, rejected. He said that true healing requires us to descend, to face the darkness inside. Not to conquer it, but to integrate it, to become whole. And this is where shadow work becomes more than theory. It becomes practice. One way to begin is through journaling. Ask yourself, what part of me do I try to hide from others? What do I judge most harshly in others? And might that reflect something unresolved in me? These reflections can bring buried emotions into awareness. Another technique is inner dialogue. Visualize the part of yourself you fear or dislike, and speak with it. Ask it why it exists. Ask it what it's protecting. Often, the very parts we push away are guardians of old wounds, carrying unmet needs or childhood stories that were never heard. And then there's somatic awareness, learning to feel the shadow in the body. Where do you clench, tighten, go numb when certain memories or emotions arise? Bringing breath and gentle attention to those places helps release what was held in silence. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself, it's about becoming honest, whole, and from that wholeness, healing naturally follows. So, how do you know if you're in the dark night? Well, it doesn't announce itself. It feels more like an unraveling, a loss of meaning, a sense of being deeply alone. You might find yourself asking, "Where is God?" or "Why doesn't anything feel real anymore?" But, and here's the paradox, underneath all that loss, something waits, something sacred. What if that inner void isn't empty? What if it's full of something so vast, so still, it only reveals itself when everything else is silent? Mystics have always said this. The absence is not a void. It's the presence of something too large to grasp. As the Sufi poet Rumi wrote, "Don't turn away. Keep your gaze on the bandaged place. That's where the light enters you." In Buddhist thought, too, there is the concept of the great doubt, a deep existential questioning that precedes awakening. The Zen tradition often speaks of a point where the seeker must face the utter futility of ego until only direct experience of reality remains. Even the Tao Te Ching whispers, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." And in this crucible, the soul begins its alchemy. Suffering here is not punishment, it's purification. Like fire refining gold, the pain strips away illusion, ego, control. And what rises in its place is something more spacious, more true. What if letting go isn't defeat but freedom? What if surrender is the most courageous act of all? Rainer Maria Rilke once wrote, "Live the questions now." And maybe that's all we can do in the dark night. Live the questions. Trust the mystery. Embrace the not knowing. And then, slowly, quietly, something changes. The darkness begins to lift. Not all at once, but the silence becomes gentler. Insight returns, not with fireworks, but like the sunrise. Soft, sure, inevitable. You don't go back to who you were. You emerge with something deeper. A sense of peace, of knowing, of presence. You may still walk through life the same way, but now your feet touch the ground with reverence. Your eyes see more clearly. Your heart holds more. And so, I'll ask you again, could it be that everything you feared to lose was never truly you? That this sacred unraveling was actually a becoming? The dark night of the soul is not just a passage through pain. It's a rite of passage into presence. In a world that celebrates light and speed, the dark night invites us into the fertile soil of shadow and slowness. It tells us, without descent, there can be no ascent. Without emptiness, no fullness. So, if you find yourself in that place, where nothing makes sense and the silence is deafening, pause. Listen. Trust. You are not lost, you are being rewritten, you are not dying, you are being born. This is not the end, it's the sacred descent into awakening. Take a breath here. Feel your feet on the ground, the rise and fall of your breath, the space around your heart. Whatever you're carrying, questions, doubts, fears, know this. The darkness does not mean you are alone. It means something sacred is happening beneath the surface. Let yourself be still. Let the silence be a companion, not an enemy. Trust that even now, something in you is listening, waiting, remembering. This is not just a story of suffering. It is a path to presence.